like a safe haven play like gold. The $100,000 mark was key resistance for Bitcoin for quite a while, and now it's very strong support for Bitcoin. So, again, it's been acting as a risk asset. So as long as we've got this risk-on sentiment, Bitcoin should continue to do well. Now, we do expect Bitcoin to become more of a safe haven play eventually, along with gold. We've got China ramping up stimulus, which would be positive for Bitcoin. We've got the realization that, again, so many governments, so much debt, so much deficits globally, that fiat currencies are dramatically losing their purchasing power. The U.S. M2 money supply, I just saw this yesterday, it's now $22 trillion. So there's liquidity all over the place. And that, again, is going to hurt purchasing power of the currencies. And it's not just the U.S. dollar currency, it's all these currencies. And all they keep doing is they keep adding liquidity, and that just keeps eating away at the purchasing power of currencies. So that makes Bitcoin an alternative for fiat currencies, similar to gold. So for now, we see Bitcoin, we need to see it hold above 100,000. The all-time high is 112,000. Now, if the 100,000 fails to hold, next really key support would be 92.5. Now, so that's Bitcoin. I want to talk to you real briefly about something I just ran across the other day. Now, other than Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies have done nothing. Ethereum, which is the second biggest crypto traded, it's been trading sideways since May. But I am looking at a chart here right now of a company that I guarantee most of your listeners have never heard of, at least certainly not until the last couple of days. The company's called Bitmine Immersion Technologies. And even though Ethereum has not moved at all, this company's chairperson, Tom Lee, he's a big crypto guy, he's saying Ethereum is the new Bitcoin. So sure. Okay. And so what he's done, they've announced that his company, Bitmine, plans to implement an Ethereum treasury strategy. So that's very similar to what MicroStrategy did with Bitcoin. They basically buy it and become a treasury for it. Now, you need to pay attention to this, though. So last Friday, so we're talking June 27th, Bitmine was trading at $4.09. It closed Thursday at $135. That's an increase of 3,300% in less than 5 days. Think about that. The stock has jumped 3,300% on the idea of buying Ethereum. And from what I've read, from what I can read, understand so far, they still do not even own any Ethereum yet. So this massive rally is totally based on the idea of pursuing an Ethereum treasury strategy. Its market cap on last Friday, on June 27th, was $25 million. Today, Jim, $810 million. It's almost $1 billion. So you think about how much money Tom Lee and his buddies have made on this little deal in the last 5 days. There's another company, Circle, that's another one that's doing a similar kind of thing. I think we're going to see a bunch more of these things popping up. And to me, that's a warning telling us that the next bubble top is fast approaching.
You have a lot of free services and some premium ones. Can you remind our listeners about all your services and how they can subscribe to them?
Oh, yeah, sure. We got 6 of them now. Okay, let's rattle them off here. Well, we got a trend letter, so that's the initial one. That's our flagship one. So 24th year, that. It publishes every Sunday night. Its focus is for long-term investors, people who want to understand what drives the market. So that's about $600 a year. And that covers equities, currencies, precious metals, commodities, and bonds. The second one is Trend Technical Trader. So online service, updates every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's both for active and long-term investors. It started out as a hedging strategy, but it now does long trades as well. It also covers equities, precious metals, commodities, and it includes our proprietary gold technical indicator. And that one sells for $650 a year. Trend Disruptors is the next one. So that's for speculators with risk capital. service invest in disruptive ideas, AI, virtual, augmented reality, 5G, cloud, Internet of Things, all the cool stuff. That one sells for about $600 a year. Now we've got a new one, our DeFi Digest. Now that's free right now. So if any of you listeners want to get on that, just briefly again what that's all about. DeFi is basically leveraging a blockchain technology where financial services without the traditional intermediaries like banks. So to put in some quick context here, think of it as like on the ground floor of a financial revolution, just like those who invested in Bitcoin over a decade ago. It's a peer-to-peer financial services built on blockchain technology, and that's open to anybody who has an internet connection. And there's no paperwork, no middlemen. We've got, I'm sure I mentioned this last time, the largest banks in the world, we're talking JP Morgan and BlackRock. They're projecting $15 to $30 trillion market for real world assets in the next 10 years. So, we're talking about making digital transactions on a huge range of assets, from like corporate and government debt to real estate, fine art, commodities, you name it. I think I did an example, when I was last on your show, of a tokenized, fractionalized warehouse where anybody could buy a piece of a warehouse or a racehorse or an artwork. It's an amazing, concept. And so what you're looking at is, early adopters, they're going to have a really unique opportunity to capitalize on this shift, just like we saw with the rise of the internet and with Bitcoin. And as I keep warning people, there will be a learning curve, just like Bitcoin investors had to learn new technology. DeFi investors are going to need to understand digital wallets, private keys, smart contracts. But that's why we created the DeFi Digest newsletter, because it addresses these challenges. What we want to do is to educate and provide guidance to help subscribers work with their way through the process. And and we're going to be giving them ideas on where to invest. So again, it's free right now. So now the other one we've got is free is our Market Pulse. So that's another news service. It's basically just a market recap. I'm a technical person. I like charts. And I just find when I show somebody a chart and give them a brief explanation what's going on, they really can understand very quickly what's happening. So that's what we're doing. We're highlighting key market moves, some of them daily, some just weekly. But again, I think the feedback's been really good. So I think that's something we'll continue with. And then our last one is Headlines. So that's a free daily service. What we do there is we just review what's happening in the markets every morning, and we send out the headlines that we think investors need to be aware of. And these headlines, some of them, you're not going to see them in the mainstream press. These are things that we dig around and we find that we think might have an impact on the markets. And then the readers can simply read the headline, and if they want to read the more detail, they just simply click on the link and they can read the article. So if any of your listeners, they want to have any questions about our services, or if they want to get in on the Market Pulse and or the DeFi Digest, just send us an email at info@thetrendletter. So all one word, thetrendletter.com.
Martin, thank you so much for being on This Week in Money.
Oh, always a pleasure, Jim. Thanks for having me.
We've been speaking with Martin Straith, founder of Trend News Online at thetrendletter.com. He was speaking to us from Coquitlam, BC. Coming up, Jim Willie, next on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision. This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
My guest is Jim Willie, editor of the Hat Trick Letter online at golden-jackass.com. Welcome to This Week in Money.
Well, it's good to be back, and I guess this is a new launch, a new form, but the same people. I wish you luck with it all, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Jim's a monthly guest with us on goldradio.fm. This month we've invited him on This Week in Money. He's speaking to us from an undisclosed location.
I'm on the planet Mars. I got to tell you, so there's a bit of a lag.
The latest issue of your hat trick letter is out. Can you tell us about it and how our listeners can subscribe?
Yeah, this month was quite interesting. I have a brief section on precious metals because they're in I think, of consolidation mode. The big issue right now is the war in Israel and Iran, and we got some questions about that. But let me just make a comment about really good investments, because paper money is it's suffering a massive decay in the last 2 or 3 years. Decay. Not a collapse, just a decay. I like silver. I actually like it more than gold, and I've liked it more than gold for a long time. We don't have quite as much a gain in the last 2 years with silver as we do gold, but I think we're going to have some rather substantial gains in the near future, because everything is breaking with respect to silver, and Mexico is, I think, forming a cartel with China without using the word cartel. I have an interesting chapter this month on XRP, and I believe that some of the troubles that are coming with respect to the Treasury bond are going to work directly into XRP's favor. So, I do have a summary of the war in the report, but, mine is not a war correspondent newsletter. I'm financial, economic, banking, currency, gold, and the metals. So I have a summary of a number of different angles regarding the war, and we're going to cover some of that as we proceed here.
You do consulting sessions for a fee. Can you tell us about them and how our listeners can subscribe to that?
There's a consult button, and it's next to the donate button and the sponsor button. But the consult button is very special. It gives people an opportunity to have an extended phone call with me, and we've been doing some with Zoom video calls, and they're really quite enjoyable. I got to say, and this is a remarkable statistic. I've had 5.5 years now of doing consults, and I've done a little over 800 of them. 800. So they serve a purpose, obviously, for the clients. If you assume that what I have to say is worth the time, but I also benefit. I'd say maybe 1 out of every 15 calls is some serious boots on the ground intel from the clients, like with respect to banks or Los Angeles Underground, a number of different things. With respect, I had one lady who got shot by darts. They're drones that are shooting darts at people, and they're targeting people. And the darts are tiny chips with poison and other elements. We're under attack. I mean, people better really wake up. We're under attack. We had the pandemic with the vaccine to do tremendous harm, killed millions of people, and for everyone that was killed, there were about 4 or 5 that were seriously injured to the point where they couldn't continue working. Then we had the election fraud, and then we had the lockdown, which destroyed businesses, in particular small businesses. And then we had the fires, and none of them are natural. Anyone who thinks the fires are natural is, I think, a grade A moron. They're not really aware of the technology. And so many people are not really interested in the technology. Well, they should, because the technology is rather advanced. Anyway, the consults are special. They provide me boots-on-the-ground information at times. And I just did one a couple of days ago. Really nice couple. See, where are they from? Pennsylvania. Really nice couple. They're in Penn State territory, Penn State University territory. And nice people. All right. When I say all right, I mean next.
Why did Russia go into Ukraine in the first place?
This is actually more complex than even some patriots realize. I believe it was late 2021. Many different ports were told by the shipping companies, like the South Korean exporters or Japanese exporters, we don't want your treasury bills. Okay, that was late 2021. And that prompted the U.S. to do something in order to alleviate the pressure on the treasuries in general, but in particular at the port facilities. So I believe that a sequence of events began where NATO made an announcement that they were going to annex or invite Ukraine, which was a part of the Soviet Union. Imagine what would happen if Florida or Texas or Virginia were annexed by the Russians. That'd be holy hell. Well, that's what NATO did. And by the way, NATO was originally staffed by Nazi German generals. We didn't win the war, okay? We didn't. We didn't win the Vietnam War. We didn't win World War II. We invited all the Nazis to occupy the United States. Anyway, NATO was originally staffed by Nazi Wehrmacht generals. So NATO invited Ukraine to join their alliance. At the same time, just to make sure everything got really hot and heavy fast, the Ukraine government, which was set up by a coup d'etat by Hillary and the Mossad back in 2015, called the Maidan coup, the Ukrainian government decided, let's go murder and do ethnic cleansing in the eastern oblasts, the eastern provinces, if you will. So they began murdering anybody who speaks German. I'm sorry, anyone who speaks Russian. So ethnic cleansing and invitation to NATO sparked the war. And that's why Russia went into Ukraine. Originally, I did not call it a war. For several months, I called it an operation. They were looking to prevent the Azov Nazis, sponsored by the Ukraine government, with Nazi swastikas everywhere, but not in the U.S. news, not in the Western European news. Everywhere, Nazi swastikas and murders and ethnic cleansing and just wanton murder, including people over the age of 50 and 60. They were just slitting their throats, tossing them over balconies, and that got the Russians into the battle zone. Okay.
What role do you think NATO is playing in the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
They're running it. They're running the entire thing. They're running the entire war. This is a NATO war against Russia. It's the Atlanticists. These Atlanticists have a theory, and they've been espousing this and lusting for this for 20, 30, 40 years. They want to take over Russia, divide it up, and have regions governed by Germany, region by Italy, region by Netherlands, region by France, region by Belgium. There's no more cockeyed, insane, lunatic concept than the Atlanticist desire and plan. So, NATO has a war with Russia, and they're playing it out in Ukraine. And they're trying to play it out in the western part of Russia. And they've started a little bit. It's very limited. Russia is eventually going to take over the entire country of Ukraine.
What are your intel sources saying on the Russia-Ukraine conflict?
They're not actually saying a lot. They're talking more about Iran, but I will tell you some of the things that I've heard. They verified, the military sources verified, it was about a year ago, and it was 20 stories below ground in a suburb of Kiev, and a NATO command center was destroyed by a hypersonic missile, or maybe two at the same site. The first breaks down the fortifications, and the second one destroys the command center. And a number of NATO officials were killed. The military sources mention from time to time what is going on underground in Ukraine. And there are blood harvesting centers for adrenochrome. There are child trafficking. The Israelis have been identified now by the Russians as running child trafficking in Ukraine. I don't like to get into those details anymore. I'm going to try to leave that topic alone, but the military sources confirm like 8 different types of trafficking. Those that I mentioned, but narcotics, amphetamines, bioweapons, human organs, white women, and obviously kids. They offer a discount on the price of kids in Ukraine, by the way. A nice $20,000, $30,000 discount because they got so many. I did one client consult, and the guy said, Jim, I've got a girlfriend, and her best friend is a woman from Ukraine, and she is from Mariupol. And she said kids go missing in Mariupol all the time. Hundreds and hundreds. Mariupol, that's in the eastern part of Ukraine. NATO is in charge of this, and NATO will lose this. And I think, I'm not sure that my intel sources agree with this, but I believe NATO eventually is going to be dissolved because they're going to lose their money laundering income. It's going to get cut off.
Why did Israel bomb Iran in the first place?
Well, there's a reason they state, and there's a reason they don't. And usually, I'd say since World War II, almost no war has been described correctly as for its motive. Not a single war, including Vietnam. I almost went to Vietnam. I turned 18 in the last year of that war, so I was pretty lucky. But Israel attacked Iran, according to my military sources, which is very much in sync with my own thinking and my own research and my own, colleagues and the information we drum up. It was to halt. There are two motives, and one they talk about, one they don't. The one they talk about is to halt the nuclear refinement industry. They have rather extensive, and they're underground, by the way. They're not sitting on the surface waiting to be destroyed like morons. They're underground. They're like 10 stories, 20 stories underground. So any claim that they've been destroyed by aerial missiles is likely to be a bunch of bullshit. So they talk about limiting the Iranian nuclear potential, because if they're doing refining, that means that a lot of people don't understand this, but it's the heavy isotopes of uranium that are unstable and are subject to fission, breaking them. And they're used, that uranium supply is used in peaceful nuclear reactors. But the West, including the U.S. and Israel, concluded that their output, and I don't know how they understand their total output, unless they have spies on the ground. They said their output far exceeded they call them nukes, a nuclear plant, nuclear generating electric plant, a nuke plant, nuke generator. So that's the one reason. But there's another reason I'm told about by the military sources, and that is that Iran maintains a rather extensive database, and it's a fraction of the Epstein database, a fraction. But it's still rather effective and powerful, and it's used more for sabotage and assassination than it is inside the United States, than it is for extortion and control of political policy, like the Epstein file is. Epstein is about military control, political control, and Iran's database is about assassinations, sleeper cells, and industrial espionage to some extent. All right, so I think there's going to be, you have more questions on this. All right, that's fine. Why don't you go to the next question before I jump into that kind of an answer?
Do you think Iran's nuclear sites were destroyed?
No. No, but the press has to say it was because it was such a big effort. What are they going to do? Get on MSM News and say the United States supplied $30 to $40 billion in weaponry to Israel and it was all a failure? It didn't work? There are 7 different nuclear underground facilities and only 1 or 2 was partially damaged? You think they're going to say that? No, they say that they're destroyed. And the private intel inside, military rooms and between the walls is, we didn't get it. Okay, it's not easy to destroy something that's 20 stories underground. How do you do that? If you got a good answer, pass it on, because a hypersonic missile will do a lot of damage 5 to 10 stories down, and then you need another one to go deeper. And that's what the Russians were doing outside Kiev several months ago. I think their nuclear sites were moved. I mean, they had good warning. Trump gave them good warning, said, we're going to give you like 30 days to make a decision. So they moved some of them. I don't think many nuclear refinement facilities were harmed. That's my opinion. Okay.
What intel are you hearing about the Israel-Iran conflict and what is likely to happen going forward?
The short war will end soon, and it will prevent a bigger, wider war involving more countries. There's a concept in forest fire fighting. It's called building a firewall. And they borrowed the term in the computer technology for anti-hacking purposes. But a firewall, I'll give you an example. There might be a raging fire in northern Colorado, and it's moving west. So near the border, they make about a 200-meter wide column, and it goes up for about a mile or more, and they burn it, and they control it so it doesn't spread. So when the big fire comes and meets that line, it stops. It's called a firewall. Fire line, firewall, they got a number name, but I call it a firewall. I believe this war is a design war to be limited, and let me just say what I believe the motive is. The motive is to eliminate the Epstein file databases and the Iranian databases, and the public story is to eliminate the nuclear refinement facilities.
Depending on what happens with these conflicts, could the price of crude become volatile?
Yeah, it was very volatile on the downside on June 23. It went down 11%, and I put that in the report that was posted a few days ago for June, the June report. I said, this is the market confirming we will not have a wider war. We will not have the Hormuz Strait sabotaged. There's talk. There's a lot more talk than there is action. I think it's like 5-to-1 ratio of bullshit to actual reality. There's talk that Iran is going to sabotage with mines the Hormuz Strait. By the way, it's 22 miles wide. I mean, people need to wake up. A lot of Americans think it's like a few hundred meters wide. I've talked to some, and they say, isn't it easy? Isn't it easy? You just jam it up? It's 22 miles wide. Imagine 22 22 Mississippi rivers. 22! Okay, the Mississippi is a mile wide. I don't think China will allow Iran, their big trade partner and oil supplier and LNG supplier, natural gas, China will not permit Iran to sabotage the Hormuz Straits. That was a rather fortuitous and pleasant surprise that China delivered. If the Hormuz Strait is sabotaged and obstructed, we're going to see a $20, $30 increase in the price of oil. We're going to see a big drop in supply, and we're going to see China hopping mad for losing supply. And, China's the mouthpiece of the Pacific Rim Asian coast. Whatever happens to China with oil supply cut off, it also happens to Japan and to Korea. They all depend on Mideast oil. China's the one with the big mouth. Japan's not going to say anything. So China comes out and talks, and Japan does all their actions quietly. This is going to, I think, have a quick and sudden end,